in this room, for example, has stairs. Okay, and for people in wheelchairs, that's a huge obstacle. Another example is at Lincoln Elementary. The cafeteria for the school is in the basement. So if you have somebody that has mobility issues, they either have to be carried down or their meals have to be carried up and they have to eat separately. Not ideal. Special ed offices in all of the buildings, none of them were purpose-built. None of them were built for the needs or for the space requirements of people who might have some kind of mobility limitations. In some schools, it's as simple as, hey, it was where we used to store chairs in a closet, move those out, put a desk in, and now it's the speech pathologist office. It's not ideal. This bond would create new purpose-built special ed spaces in basically all of the buildings and bring us into full ADA compliance, including elevators at Lincoln and Washington Elementary. And again, that's what ADA is all about, is to give people with any kind of disadvantage at least the access, the opportunity for full participation. Deferred maintenance. This is a big chunk of the bond, as you'll see, and it's pretty staggering, the deterioration that you see when you look around Hayes schools. Hayes High School, again, the youngest school in the district. This is the best one in terms of age, and it's got some of the worst issues. You see over here water penetration through the ceiling, and once you have that, it's not just as simple as stripping off and putting a new roof on, it's everything underneath it. Hayes High School, corrosion at the entries. This is an example of a corroded plumbing pipe. I'll pass this around. Marty Straub, the principal at Hayes High, reports that they're having these types of blowouts pretty frequently now. And again, that's just a plumbing pipe, a plumbing fixture from the youngest building in the district. You've got masonry where the bricks have popped out or need to be retucked. You've got concrete work where over the years salt has gotten down in there and ice and water and it's just popped the concrete out. It's no longer safe. Rusty valves in mechanical rooms, rusty fixtures in the bathrooms, pretty much every building. A lot of outdated lighting fixtures. And that's a real problem because what you do is you resort to cannibalization. You can't find ballasts like this. They're no longer made. Bulbs are actually becoming an issue as well, certain types of fluorescent bulbs. So all of these things need attention, and again, they're all addressed in the bond. Okay, $94 million, where does it go? The biggest chunk by far is for expansions, primarily for special ed expansions, for multi-purpose / storm shelter / gymnasiums in all the schools. Safety and security, the Hayes High School auditorium, all the buildings, we talked about the storm shelters that were for gyms. Hayes High is a little bit different. The intent for Hayes High is to give it a brand new auditorium, an 800-seat, basically state-of-the-art auditorium that you could use during the daytime for assemblies, for plays, for community meetings, anything like that, but also doubles as the storm shelter for the school. The nice thing about it is 900 kids, you can get them in and out of that room pretty quickly from anywhere in the building. And then, of course, secure building entrances at all of the buildings. Deferred maintenance, about 19% or $18 million would go to those plumbing, to those lighting issues, the electrical issues. And then renovations, that's where, and you'll see it in the building slides, where you're taking what was once, say, a gym space at O'Laughlin. And because O'Loughlin's getting that new gym and storm shelter, it's now becoming a dedicated cafeteria and a kitchen. Or maybe it's being converted to a classroom space. Renovations, 17%, and then you've got some smaller chunks, technology and equipment, about $2.6 million for furniture as well. If you're building all this space, you got to put something in it. Hayes High receives a pretty good-sized technology addition, and then the equipment that goes in there. Site improvements, there's a few places that would get new sidewalks, new parking areas. O'Laughlin in particular is earmarked for a new drop-off and pickup point and a little spur road that goes behind the school on property that the district owns. And if you've ever been around O'Laughlin at 3 o'clock, it's probably not the place in Hayes you want to be. So that would remedy that congestion issue there. So that's kind of what a breakout of the bond looks like. Let's take a walk and look through all the schools and see how it impacts them each. Hayes High, again, is the baby of USD489 at a ripe 37 years old. 30% of this bond would go towards Hayes High, $28 million. The biggest chunk of that, $8.5 million, would be for that auditorium/storm shelter that we talked about. You see that right here. The admin section is currently here. That would become classrooms. The admin section, the attendance folks, the secretaries would move to the front, giving them positive visual control of both of the entrance points here and here. 2,000-seat gym. This is the one you probably hear the most about from people. Well, the Hayes High doesn't need another gym. Actually, they do. If you've gone into Hayes High for any kind of awards presentation, for senior night, for some of the basketball games, or a tournament, or when we get the opportunity to host events like Special Olympics or state wrestling tournaments, that place is packed. I'm not sure what the seating capacity is, but it's far less than 2,000. This would give the school a second much-needed gym in the student commons area, $6.7 million. Plumbing and HVAC, $6.6 million, and then the tech classrooms, the new addition out here in the industrial arts part of the school, $4 million. You can't see it down here. The Hayes High has a student capacity of 1,100. I think we're just under 800 right now, so there's room to grow. It's not that Hayes High is undersized, but it's not built for the needs that Hayes High has today, and certainly not going into the future. So that's why 30% of the bond is focused on Hayes High. Again, part of it's just economies of scale. You've got so many students, but there's a fair amount of work that needs to be done there. Hayes Middle School, 54 years old, would get 20% of the bond, $19 million. Nearly $6 million of that goes to the gym, to the wrestling room and locker rooms. That's over here. Again, you hear the argument, Hayes Middle doesn't need another gym. And Dean, if you could talk a bit about some of the scheduling conflicts that we see right now with Hayes Middle.
One of the big issues are if you have middle school kids that are out for any activity, the boys practice typically at 6 o'clock in the morning, either at the middle school gym or during wrestling practice, they're out at the high school at 6 o'clock in the morning. When we have gym class, there's a net that comes down and divides the gym up into two sections, boys on one side, girls on the other, and it is absolutely packed. It isn't an issue of, we just want another gym. It's the academic side of it. Practice 6 o'clock in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon or later, most of the kids get out, is a long, long day. And Mike will talk about the cafeteria, but a lot of those...
This is the office right now. All of this area would become a special ed dedicated area. This is currently grass. The front of the building cuts off there. Expanded cafeteria and kitchen area, $2.3 million. Capacity of Hayes High was built originally for 768 students. They're under that right now, but in the coming years, in the next 5 to 10 years, there is going to be a little population wave rolling through Hayes High, and that is going to push it over that 768 capacity. So again, this, the addition of these extra spaces, if it's bad with 768, it's worse with 868, trying to run those kids through the gym every day. Roosevelt, 49 years old, built in 67. $14.3 million to the bond would go to Roosevelt. That's about 15%. Roosevelt doesn't quite double in size, but it grows significantly. A big chunk of the back of the school here is to be renovated for special ed. Additional classrooms, 12 of them with restrooms over here, becomes a storm shelter. This is one of the schools that doesn't have the gym as the storm shelter, but it does add a significant amount of classroom space. There is a new gym for Roosevelt because the current gym is to become a cafeteria, a music classroom, and a kitchen space, along with renovated restrooms. There's also a parking expansion for faculty and visitors here. Capacity, as Roosevelt currently stands, is 360, and when you look at the enrollment at Roosevelt, it's well over 400 today. You try to, again, project where it's going to be in 5 years. It's well north of that. So Roosevelt certainly is one that's feeling a space constraint. Wilson, built in 59, $10 million, 11% of the bond goes there. Cafeteria and storm shelter, $3.6 million. The special ed edition, which right now is open. $3.1 million. Deferred maintenance, $2.5, and the entry, again, with the security features, $357,000. Wilson has some minor issues in terms of capacity, not as bad as Roosevelt's, but again, looking into the future, it becomes a bigger issue. Lincoln Elementary, 91 years old, which I believe makes it the oldest in 489, would get $7.8 million. Most of that, not surprisingly, is for deferred maintenance, problems that already exist with HVAC, with lighting, with windows, etc. The new gymnasium and storm shelter, this currently is Lincoln's gym. That would become a dedicated cafeteria and music education space, and things like that. That would help with space a bit as well. O'Laughlin, 55 years old, $7.4 million, 8% of the bond would go to O'Laughlin. $2 million goes to the cafeteria and storm shelter right here. This is O'Loughlin's current gym. $2 million to deferred maintenance, and then a whole new special ed addition on what is currently grass on the north part of the building, $1.16 million. And lastly, as we talked a little bit about the drop-off and pickup point here on Victory Road, would entail building a new road that connects out here to 12th Street. That would take a lot of pressure off of pickup times at O'Laughlin in particular. Washington Elementary, I guess it's not called Washington anymore. I still think of it that way.
It's Washington.
Building, early childhood connections, basically Head Start. 1% of the bond, just over $1 million. A quarter of that is for an elevator. Again, it's a multi-floored building, and for a way to get kids up and down if they're mobility impaired. And then $750,000 to deferred maintenance and the things you would expect to see in a 90-year-old brick building. Capacity it's a very small school for 120. It's currently 150-ish. But again, they're not all there at the same time. They stagger throughout the day, so space isn't, crowding isn't necessarily an issue at Washington. So a couple fun questions. Who was president when 489 passed its last construction bond? This will give you a sense of how long it's been. Some of you probably weren't alive when this happened. Jimmy Carter was the president when we did our last construction bond. $5 million, $5.5 million for Hayes High School. When was the last USD489 bond issued? 1993, again, primarily for Kennedy HVAC, the Hayes High lunchroom additions, and then for some other district repairs. The last 489 bond payment made, 2009. That's when those Kennedy bonds paid off. So for 8 years, we've had no car payment, basically. We've been putting nothing in towards maintenance other than the sliver of the budget that's dedicated to that. So again, in my estimation, I look at this as we are really trailing other districts. And when you look at the other districts, 4A, 5A schools on a chart, it really bears that out. Now, I'm a very no-tax Republican by nature, and I look at that and I say, wow, 0, that's great. And if we're at the bottom of the scale in terms of total mill levy, that's great. It's a double-edged sword in Hayes because even though you have a low mill levy, your valuation is high. So when everybody says our taxes are high, it's because we're blessed, in a sense, with very high valuations. Not all these other areas up here necessarily have that, but again, without that bond going towards dedicated maintenance and upgrades, we are definitely falling behind the curve. Again, the statement you often hear or read about, we're overtaxed already. Be that as it may, our mill levy is actually the lowest it's been at any point in the last 25 years. We're down now to 49 point, and it goes off the screen there. But if you look historically at where we've been back when those other bonds paid off, this is about the time when the Hayes High bond from 77 would have paid off. Took the new bond in 93, and then that slowly paid off as well. You see that actually we're in a pretty good place right now in terms of mill levy. Another interesting fact, in Hayes and like most other Kansas cities, the Parks and Rec gets their funding attached to the school board, to the school mill levy. So out of that 49, that's the mill levy dedicated to 489, About 3.2 of that goes to Hayes Rec. So on this slide, 46.241, that's the portion that goes to 489. The other 3 points go towards Hayes Rec and their operations. So if this bond, which is coming up on the ballot in June 7th, is to pass, it's going to pass in one of two ways. The volunteer committee went out and got 1,600 signatures from voters to put a sales tax question on there. Currently, everybody knows that we did a sales tax vote a couple years ago for renovations down at the courthouse, the jail, the new county EMS building. We agreed to 0.5% sales tax for several years to pay those projects off that would expire in 2018. What this question does is it would keep that 0.5% sales tax on starting in 2018 for another 10 years to help pay off this bond. It's estimated that it would raise somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million a year. So in 10 years, conceivably, it could pay off $30 million or more of this bond. In Hayes, as you know, we have a very high pull factor given the interstate and where we're located in northwest Kansas. Frankly, I love the idea of a sales tax. If I go to Salina or Wichita and get a hotel room, there's always a little addition on the bottom of your bill that goes to pay off for their schools or their arena or some other project. You know, we're always paying everybody else's taxes. Why not let some of the guests in Hayes help pay for our infrastructure? So again, if the bond and the sales tax question pass with a yes vote, this is the impact on the mill levy. You would go again from that 46.2 up to 57.7 for the first 10 years or so, when it would jump to 65. The reason for that is the bond would be let in two issues. You can let a bond once in one big chunk, or you can do it in pieces. And in this case, in this scenario anyway, it's in two different issues. The other way it could pass is if for some reason that question doesn't make it on the ballot, or if the voters turn that question down. And then it's up to the property owners in the 489 district to pay that through property taxes with the mill levy. That would have an impact of about $27.60 on a $150,000 home, $27.60 a month. If the sales tax question were to pass, that gets reduced to $16.53 a month on a $150,000 home. So the difference between the property tax and the sales tax is pretty significant when you add that up over the period, over the life of the bond, 20 years. I'm going to back up a step. There's one little thing that in putting this all together, this exercise, I found out that really kind of gets me as a Kansas taxpayer. The state of Kansas has a formula. Some districts that pass bonds, the state contributes money to pay off that bond, 38%. And I'll give you an example. Last year, voters in Salina approved a $105 million bond. Voters in Mays, in West Wichita, and you guys go to Mays, you've been to Mays and driven up and down 21st and Mays and the mall and all that, passed a $70 million bond. In both of those cases, the state of Kansas ponied up 38% of that cost because of the way they're valued. And let me give you the reason why. Hayes, in the 489 catchment area, has an assessed value of $300 million. That's what assessors deem all the property in 489 to be worth. In the Mays district, it's $377 million. The difference is Mays has 8,000 students, Hayes has under 3,000. So when you divide that 377 over 8,000 students, you arrive at a number. That qualifies for 38%. When you take our 3,000 students and divide into that the $300 million, you're considered a wealthy district, a rich district. We don't qualify for any state aid. It doesn't seem fair to me, especially if you drive around Mays or Salina and look around, but that's the reality. So if anything, I hope you come away from this presentation thinking that, yeah, there really are some legitimate needs and some very pressing needs in the school today. And my answer to that is, it's up to us to fix it. We can't look to the state of Kansas for help. First of all, they're broke. They can't pay attention. They certainly can't pay for the repairs that the school needs, and even if they could, they wouldn't because we're considered a quote-unquote wealthy district. It's a really big number, 94 million. But it's gotten that way because we've put no money basically towards maintenance in 30 plus years. So the ask, I would ask three things of you if I could. First is that you attend the city council meetings on March 17th and March 24th to get that sales tax question on the ballot. Ideally, we would have that on this June 7th ballot at the same time we do the bond question. Second is to stay informed and inform other 489 voters of what you've seen and heard tonight and what you've seen walking around our schools. Include your friends and neighbors both in and out of the city limits, because again, 489's catchment area extends beyond the city limits. Excuse me. But also, talk to your friends and neighbors, people that you go to church with, from Holy Family, from TMP, because they've got a stake in this too. I was kind of surprised when you look at how the two districts are interwoven. 489 provides a lot of transportation support to TMP for some of their far-flung students in terms of special ed, in terms of gifted and talented program. There's a lot of cross-pollination between the two entities there. TMP is gracious enough to allow us use of their property at O'Laughlin to get students in and out of the school every day. So also there's crossover with the gyms, with sports teams, and potentially there's a lot more possibility there when you look at the auditorium and for plays that both schools do. So this isn't just a 489 issue. This is really a Hays issue and an Ellis County issue because, again, our boundaries go beyond the city boundaries. And lastly, and most importantly, I would ask that you look at the facts, arrive at your decision, and hopefully you'll join me in voting yes. Again, it's a very tall order, and I hate taxes probably more than anybody, but what is your option to get this done? There really is no other option than the people of Hays to make this happen. Stay informed. This is something that's a little bit in flux, but the board has discussed at a couple of their work sessions the possibility of separating the two gyms, the Hays High School gym and the Hays Middle School gym, making them a separate question. So possibly voters might have the option of saying, yeah, I want to vote yes on the 84 or 85 million package that doesn't include the gyms, and if you want the gyms as well, that's going to be a second question for $8 million. Okay, that's the way Mays did it last year. Mays did $82 million questions. 70 million of it was for expansion, 12 million of it was for a new pool. The expansion passed, the pool didn't. Okay, so that's something that the board is looking at with their legal team. Can they do that at this kind of late stage in the process and make it two questions? So more to come on that. And lastly, I put this slide in there because, again, on social media I see a lot of, well, the district is mismanaging its resources and the custodians aren't doing their jobs. And I thought this picture kind of sums that up nicely. This is here at Wilson, the cafetorinasium, because it's a little tiny room that you can actually, after this, walk down and take a look at. Think about this. In the morning, it's set up for kids to come in and have breakfast. And then the tables have to be pushed to the walls, has to be cleaned up, and then they'll do a couple gym classes. Then the tables come out again for lunch. They have lunch, has to be put back away, swept up, kids will have more gym classes. And then you might have an assembly, an all-school assembly, or maybe there's a children's performance that night and you've got to set out 200 chairs. Maybe the reason the custodians aren't doing all the maintenance that exists out there, number one, because they don't have the money to do it, but number two, they don't have the time. Think about that. If you had to set up for a wedding party in your living room 3 times a day, how much time would you have to do anything else? It's crazy. That's where we're at with how we use the current schools we have. They just don't have the time to do these things. That's the pitch. That's the presentation. Any questions that perhaps I could answer, or certainly Dean could answer, about the bond issue or about the district in general?
If you do have questions, I'm going to hand you the mic so we can get those recorded. Questions, comments, anything?
I have a question. update on getting out 25 kids in a classroom is really starting to pinch at the sides, and so is there any expansion to classrooms?
The classrooms under the renovations and all those things that would be touched, this building in particular, we're looking at the small classrooms that we have, looking to see if we could expand, tear out a wall, something in the small ones in, down the hall here. But yeah, every classroom, some shape or form would be touched, whether it's lighting, flooring, doors, windows, those things. And then this building especially, the size of the classrooms is one of the biggest issues, and we would look at what we can do. We would have less, but with the addition possibly be able to still have enough to.
If you're saying that you're gonna have less, does that mean you're putting more kids in one classroom?
No, that wouldn't be the intent at all. To, whether it's the computer lab or whatever the need is, to have more space when you have 25 or 28 kids in a classroom that was designed for 18, with the desks, the technology, and everything else that we have, you can hardly maneuver, as you well know. So those are the things that we would take into consideration to make it a bigger square footage, and not for the sake of just adding more kids in that one room. Other questions, comments, anything? All this information, and when Mike went through the tax information, all of that is on the webpage, and it's broken down from, I believe, $40,000 home all the way up to a $400,000 home. Farm ground, business, it's all broken down that way. So if you really want to get an idea of what we're talking about, the example Mike had has the bond being paid off in 20 years. We're looking at probably, if it's all property tax, doing it at 25 years, and it would lower that a little bit, but you pay 5 more years, more interest, those things. But those would be determined obviously later. But all that information is on the webpage. The drawings, a list of frequently asked questions. We keep adding to that. There's several pages of them now. But we want everyone to be informed. This obviously was filmed. It'll be on YouTube and on the web. My long, boring presentation is also on there. I think Mike's probably going to win by far on number of views, but all that information is there. If you do have questions, or you run into somebody that has a question, please send them our way so we can get accurate information out and they know where they can get it, and start spreading the word of what this entails. Again, I can't sit here and tell you to vote yes, and that's why our volunteers are starting the campaign. I can give you facts, figures, everything like that. If you have groups, church group, civic organization, just a coffee shop group, anyone that you think would be interested in hearing this presentation, we have several people. Mike's one, a few others that'll go around. It wouldn't be this pitch that has vote yes and things, but to get information out, I don't care if it's 10 people, somebody will be there and visit with them. And but we want to get that out. And question? Oh, yeah. Would you get that? Sorry.
Sorry. Dumb question. Where are we at with regards to the teachers' contracts? Is my understanding last I read Hayes Daily, there was a stalemate or an impasse declared. Where are we at with personnel issues?
We're voting tomorrow.
As of last night, both sides came to an agreement. The teachers are voting tomorrow, you said, so, and then the board will meet the 21st and vote on that as well. So I thought it was probably the best session we had the mediator there, and went exceptionally well. So I think we're there.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to leave with one last point that we should have touched on in the presentation but didn't, and that has to do with timing. That was the first question that we asked in this presentation. Why now, especially when commodity prices are not great, when oil prices are actually pretty low? And the reason twofold. Number one is the fact that we keep accruing that deferred maintenance at about a $500,000 a year clip. But the other is, frankly, in terms of interest rates, this is about as good as it gets in terms of letting a bond. And the fact that it is a $94 million bond is pretty staggering. But when you look back at what it cost to pay off a $5 million bond back when 1977 interest rates, I was 7 at the time, so I didn't buy a car, but I remember my dad talking about it, and interest rates in the 18 and 20% range was not unheard of. Fast forward to 1993 when the second bond was done. You could get savings bonds at that time with a 6.25% interest rate on a savings bond. CDs were paying 8 and 9%. Okay, so again, the cost of borrowing that money was very high. Today, for institutional money, you're looking at 3% or less. So in terms of, yeah, we've got this $94 million need out there. When do you pay for it? I understand on the supply side, it's a little tight right now in terms of prices, but things eventually always turn in terms of the interest rates. It's really an optimum time to do something like this. So there may never be an ideal time for something of that size of $94 million, but interest rate wise, now's pretty darn good. Any other questions? If you're interested, in a few weeks there'll be yard signs being printed by the committee. If you'd like to have one, feel free to come down. Just put your name and address on there and we'll make sure that somebody gets one out to you. We will be holding more meetings, as Dean said, with different groups and whatnot. And then we plan on having some more public meetings as the vote date, June 7th, comes closer. Probably every 2 weeks we'll have a public meeting somewhere in Hayes, and we'll promote that to try to get more people informed and so they can make a good decision in the voting booth. But thank you very much for attending tonight. Appreciate it. Have a great evening.
Thank you.